Hi there, and welcome to session number 1. Today we begin your journey towards championship performance with one of the most important maps that we will show you. The map is called language. Now, discussing language with people is one of the harder things to do. Think about this: as I'm talking out loud, all of you are talking to yourselves, and all of this is taking place in language. So in a way, talking to people about language would be like trying to talk to this goldfish about water. When do you suppose this fish would realize that it is surrounded by and lives in water? That's right, when you would take it out of the water. Now we know fish don't have language, but if they did, this poor fish out of water might be thinking, hey, where did all that stuff go that I completely take for granted? Well, our goal for this discussion is to take you out of language for a few minutes so that you might see something new about it before you jump back in. The first thing about language we want you to consider is language is a technology. Think for a minute about why this could be an important claim. Can you see it yet? If not, that's okay, but consider this: we invented it. Like all other inventions, there was a time on the planet when human beings were here and we did not have the invention. We were still trying to coordinate action to accomplish, but we didn't have language. It's kind of like how 50 years ago we used to use typewriters to write letters to send via snail mail. Amazing to think about, right? Then, of course, we invented computers, and that invention dramatically changed how we communicated. Or think about how we used to communicate long distance. Unbelievable, right? Then we invented telephones, which of course evolved over time like all inventions do, and nowadays we use things like video conferencing to be more connected than we've ever been before. The point is, those other technologies are obviously inventions, but too often people overlook the fact that we invented language for the same purpose, namely to facilitate our accomplishment. Now, let's talk for a minute about how we use inventions. Typically, they have more than just one purpose. Take your laptop, for example. Do you ever play any games on it? It's okay to admit. Well, if you do use your laptop to play a game like solitaire, I think it would be fair to say that you have absolutely no expectation that playing that game will help you accomplish the future you intend, right? Obviously not. You're playing that game for fun, for stress relief, whatever. Well, you presumably also use your laptop to run a spreadsheet or generate a proposal, something useful for work, right? Of course you do. And when you do use your laptop for such a purpose, you do and should have an expectation that using it this way will help you accomplish things towards that future you intend. Well, what if language is like your laptop? What if language comes with multiple usages too? But most people cannot see this fact, which means they end up using the wrong type of language at the wrong time, thinking they are facilitating their own accomplishment. Kind of interesting to think about, right? Well, let's look deeper. In your workbook there, we have listed out a simple, straightforward progression for you to consider. Let's examine it from the top where it says prosperity. What we mean here is that the goal for ambitious people is to produce more prosperity, defined as wealth and wisdom, or a better life, money and knowledge for the benefit of a community. To produce more prosperity, individuals or teams must produce growth. Growth is a surplus because just breaking even isn't growth. And to produce growth, you must produce accomplishment. In other words, produce on your projects in the time frames that you promise them to other people. So as the progression outlines, as an individual or a team, you must produce accomplishment in order to produce growth, in order to produce prosperity. Now, here's where it gets interesting. In order to produce accomplishment, you must be able to coordinate action. I don't care if you work on a big team or if you are a lone ranger working completely by yourself. At some point, you have to pick up the phone, send an email, talk to a client, talk to a colleague. There has to be some coordination of action or collaboration if you are to be successful. And to collaborate, you must use language. That's the technology we invented, and it has given us an enormous sociological advantage over other social creatures. To really drive this point home, please draw a horizontal line between coordination of action and language. And above that line, please write down all other social creatures. Why all other social creatures here? Well, think about this example. Bees and ants are social creatures. And if you were to go outside right now and look at a line of ants, you would see another type of social creature coordinating action in order to produce accomplishment, such as moving some crumbs across the sidewalk to their anthill, so that their colony can grow and prosper. You would probably notice that this line of ants is very efficient and effective at coordinating action. As a matter of fact, what would happen if you decided to step on that line of ants? Right. At first they would scatter. Then within seconds they would line up and start coordinating action again. As a matter of fact, if you were to leave your foot there, the ants would either coordinate action around or maybe even right over your foot. One thing you would never see is one of the worker ants suddenly complaining to the queen about how things in the colony were being run. Why? Because they can't. They coordinate their actions in chemicals, it's called trophallaxis, and they are extremely effective when they are next to each other. But the ants where I live cannot coordinate with the ants where you live. Only people can coordinate remotely. And that is the point. Language is the tool we invented that gives us a capability that ants and all other social creatures don't have, and that is to coordinate action regardless of how far apart our bodies are. So hopefully this short story helps clarify the progression in your mind. All social creatures are following the same progression, coordinating action in order to produce accomplishment, in order to produce growth, in order to produce prosperity, but only human beings have language. The key now is to understand that there are two types of language. As we go through this discussion, please understand that we are not claiming that one type of language is always better than another type of language. Instead, we are saying that it is imperative to see the difference so that you know to use the right type of language at the right time. The two types of language are called performative and judgmental. What you have in your workbook is a table, and we ask that you fill out the table as we go through this together so that you can see what type of language each type is, how to identify each type of language, what each type of language is at its core, and most importantly, what each type of language produces. Let's start at the top of judgmental language. Judgmental language is language for no action. Going back to the analogy we were using earlier, judgmental language is like using your laptop to play solitaire. Again, nothing wrong with this, but this type of language is not language for action. It is language for connection, for stress relief, for fun. Performative language, on the other hand, is language for action. This type of language is more like running a spreadsheet or generating a proposal. It is the language of coordination and accomplishment. With this distinction in mind, let's go through the rest of the table for judgmental language. Judgmental language is language that most typically comes after the words because or but. These are things that you like or that you don't like, what you want, what you feel, what you think, etc. Following that logic, it is easy to see that judgmental language is opinion or assessment speaking. And most importantly, this type of language produces one of two things. Can you see what they are? Yep, you got it. Agreement or disagreement. As you look at the table so far, again, please understand that we are not making a negative judgment of judgmental language. This type of language is an enormous part of being human. It just comes with an inherent limitation. The furthest it will take you is agreement or disagreement, neither of which is accomplishment. Briefly then, let's look at an example of judgmental language, one that I am confident you will be able to relate to. Let's say you come in one morning and find out that there is a breakdown with an important client. So you and a few of your colleagues disappear into a conference room to try to figure out a plan of action. You're in there for about an hour, some things you agree with, some things you don't. Everyone speaks. Then you leave that meeting, go back to work, come back 2 days later, nothing happened. Have you ever had that experience? I bet you have. This is the best example of a group of people, smart, ambitious, committed people who could not see that their language during that discussion was not language for action. So, even with the best of intentions, they were doomed not to accomplish anything. In contrast, let's start working through the performative side of this framework, which is also best illustrated through examples. First example, what if you drove to your local hospital and went inside the emergency room and listened to the doctors and nurses and support staff there? Do you think you would hear more language for action or language for no action? Yeah, language for action. Next, what if you drove to the nearest airport and went up to the air traffic control tower? Assuming no one was asleep, do you think you would hear more language for action or language for no action between the air traffic controllers and the pilots? Right again, language for action. Now think about why that is. In both of these environments, everything in the world is at stake, right? Life or death. If the doctors and nurses can't coordinate action, or the pilots and the air traffic controllers don't coordinate action, people will presumably die. We are not trying to oversell this, but isn't it interesting that when everything in the world is on the line, we default to using action-based speaking? The good news is that the game of business is not life or death. You could, even after listening to this recording, go out today, do a terrible job, and get laid off. As awful as that would be, you wouldn't die. But if we're looking for any conceivable advantage we can find, why wouldn't we use the language that the doctors, nurses, pilots, and controllers are using in life or death situations? If you think about it, this is one of the reasons why so many people love sports. Sports take the innate human desire we all share to coordinate action in order to produce accomplishment and distill that desire down to a 3-hour performance on a Saturday afternoon. And those of us who have opinions and judgments about the players and coaches on the field, we're in the stands. We have to pay to watch. The players on the field affect the outcome, and when they can stay performative, especially in the face of adversity, they typically win. And when they do, we all want to be around. It's why so many people go to the victory parades, just to bask in the glory of coordinated action to produce accomplishment. Again, it's what we as people were built for. Now, we will return to that main table you started, but for this part we want to go through the different types of performatives, and you have another table to fill in for this part of the discussion. There are only 4 types of performatives. In any language, only 4. Let's go through them so that we can be on the same page moving forward. First, you have a declaration. A declaration is a promise to the future. Examples: we will grow the company by 25% next year. Or, we will put a man on the moon and return him safely within the decade. The point is, a declaration is what we use to set the direction for ourselves and our teams. This is our long-term commitment. As a side note, this is typically the hardest promise to get a person to make because the future is, by definition, so uncertain. Second, you have a promise itself. A promise is a commitment in the moment. Think about it this way. These are the things we need to do today, tomorrow, next week, are short-run commitments that we need to make and keep in order to achieve our long-run declaration. Third, you have the request. A request is a promise to be satisfied if someone else does what you ask. A couple of examples here. Will you please take out the garbage tomorrow morning? Can you build a database for me to help me with my promised cold calls? As simple as these examples sound intellectually, when we talk about workflow in our next recording, you may be surprised to find that many people are not executing this performative very well at all. The point for now is that requests are the mechanism we use to get assistance from others by handing off tasks and delegating. Finally, you have an assertion. An assertion is a promise to provide evidence. Think about an assertion compared to an assessment or an opinion. An assertion has evidence, an opinion is ungrounded. We encourage our clients to avoid taking action on ungrounded opinions. That can be dangerous. Assertions are not just feelings, thoughts, or beliefs. They are grounded statements that assist us in reviewing what things are working or not working in regard to the projects we have declared we intend to accomplish. Now, what do you notice that all of the performatives have in common? Yep, they're all promises. I knew you'd get that one. But seriously, what is one of the hardest things to get people to do in your experience? Yeah, make a promise. Everyone can have an opinion that they don't like how things are going, but ask those people what their declaration is to make things better, and you will notice it gets eerily quiet. And why do you suppose that is? Right again, promises are where accountability lives. So as we go back to the main table you were working on, let's work it through now, filling it out to completion. See, you identify performative speaking as any form of promise making. And there are only 4 promises to be made: to the future, now, to be satisfied if someone helps you, and to provide evidence. Performatives are the only form of language that happen when you say them. Everything else is idle speaking. And finally, performative speaking produces accountability. This type of speaking creates an expectation that you will come through in order to help us coordinate the action, produce accomplishment and growth, so that we might be more prosperous. Let's talk for a minute about your completed framework. I would imagine that everything you see here intellectually makes sense to you. But now that you are close to completing this recording, we want you to be sure to look around and listen more closely this week to yourself first and then to others. See if you can't take inventory of how much time during the day you and others are spending in each type of language. What's happening at your meetings? Is there a declared purpose to the meeting? If so, are we leaving our meetings with clear promises on who is accountable for what? Is the team making clear requests of one another for help when we need it? And finally, are we basing our future action on grounded assertions with evidence or the opinions of ourselves and others? As you do, consider the following. In the game of business, you either make a promise or you don't. And if you make a promise, you either keep it or you don't. And if you don't keep your promise, you either revoke it and renegotiate it before it's due, or your reputation, your personal brand, takes a hit. Business really is that simple. Not trivial, but that simple. Thinking now about a long-term goal regarding your collaboration with others, we recommend that you consider shooting for 80% performative language and 20% judgmental language while on the field of play. Remember, we are not trying to turn you or your teammates into robots, just looking to use the technology of language in the most efficient manner to help us accomplish our objectives. 2 final points before letting you go. If you would, take a look at the next page in your workbook. There you will see that we have a map, a set of quadrants with some space for you to write at each point on the dial. What we want to do here is start acclimating you to our map technology, meaning every time you see one of these diagrams, they always map over each other like topographical maps in geography. What we'd like to do here is take what you've already seen regarding our performatives and show you how they fit on our maps. We want to do this for 2 reasons. Reason 1, it is important to continue to get a feel for the natural sequencing of promises, and sometimes seeing it this way helps. See, declarations come first because they set the direction and create a compass for us to true off of. This is why we claim that declarations manifest intention. The dictionary definition of manifest, by the way, is to make evident. So without a declaration, an individual or a team is adrift, without direction, and others do not know how to interface with that individual or team. After the declaration is set, individuals can make promises to allocate their time appropriately in the short run to make sure that we accomplish the long-run declaration. Next, as we make promises, we often realize that we will need help. Requests then are what we use to produce work in other people, to help us keep our promises so that we achieve the declaration. Then, finally, as things are getting done, we are able to look at the results with an eye as to whether we are meeting the expectations of others. If yes, we will produce an assertion of satisfaction. If no, we will produce the assertion of dissatisfaction. I know this is a bit of a review, but it's good practice to see the performatives in a flow on a map like this. The second reason for showing you this map today is to foreshadow some of our future conversations. We claim that all people have a propensity to naturally use one of the 4 performatives over the other 3. See, some people can more easily declare the future. Here's what we should do. While others have a tendency to make more promises. Sure, I could help you out with that. Still others like to listen for requests. When is someone going to ask me to do something so I can put it on my to-do list? And finally, others of us like to focus in on the assertions. Let me review and reflect on this situation. Now, I don't expect that to be perfectly clear, but remember, we are building out a system for the coordination of action, and foreshadowing future conversations is important because every week we will build on the previous discussions. As it stands for today, I will leave you with this. When people cannot see performative speaking, they believe their judgments should alter the future. And with that, we're done. Except For your practice assignments, we want you to be as excited as this gentleman is to work on your assignments this week, keeping in mind that they are designed to help you keep the learning alive. Please plan to complete your assignments no later than end of business the day before our next application meeting. We will look forward to it. Thank you for listening, and now get back in the game.